The shocking truth, biblical prophecies about Israel's past, present, and future revealed now. The air was thick with suspense, charged like a summer storm about to break. They say history has a way of repeating itself, but what if the warnings were right? What if ancient prophecies were not just dusty words in a forgotten book? People were talking, whispers echoing through the streets as if the very buildings had ears. It started when the sun blazed unusually bright over Jerusalem, casting eerie shadows that twisted and turned. A group of scholars had unearthed a scroll hidden in the depths of the ancient city, a scroll filled with predictions that sent chills down spines and ignited fears in hearts. Could these prophecies tie back to things happening right now? As days passed, things grew even stranger. Eyewitnesses reported flashes of light dancing in the night sky, reminiscent of biblical tales. The once tranquil nights turned into a spectacle of cosmic wonder and fear. People gathered, breathless, as they pointed to the heavens. "It's a sign!" they shouted, eyes wide with terror and excitement. The local news got wind of it, and crowds surged, pressed against the barriers, their breaths mingling with disbelief. What did it all mean? Were they looking at the dawn of a new chapter or the chaos of the end? Then came the stories that were too bizarre to dismiss. A young girl claimed she had dreams of ancient battles and celestial beings, while a man in a coffee shop recounted tales of lost cities rising from the dust. Each tale was like a thread, weaving into a tapestry of panic, hope, and uncertainty. Was this the moment foretold? Or simply a test of faith? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With that, the tension climbed. Just when you thought you had a grip on reality, another twist hit. An old woman in the square began to chant words no one understood, her voice rising above the chaos like a haunting melody. Some gasped, others sneered, but all felt a shiver, something dark and deep slithering through the crowd. What held her captive? What truth had she touched? As the shadows shifted and the stories unraveled, one question lingered like smoke: what if the past was colliding with the present, and the future was just waiting to be written? Who among them would be brave enough to delve deeper into this maze of ancient warnings and modern fears? The answers lay ahead, just waiting to be discovered. The crowd held its breath, eyes glued to the old woman whose voice soared and dipped like the wind whipping through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. The words were foreign, yet they carried a weight that pressed against every heart. An electric tension crackled in the air, darting through the throng like a live wire. Many turned away, unwilling to confront what her incantation might unleash. Suddenly, a young man stepped forward, driven by curiosity and fear alike. His name was David, and he felt a strange pull towards the old woman. "What do you see?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the murmur. A tense silence fell. All eyes shifted, anticipating her next words as if they held the secrets of the universe. The woman paused, her gaze now piercing through David. "The skies will bleed, and the earth will tremble. Yet hope is a flickering flame," she replied, her tone grave yet hauntingly melodic. Gasps rippled through the crowd, a mixture of dread and wonder filling the spaces between them. David's heart raced. What did that mean? Instinctively, everyone knew this moment teetered on the edge between something profoundly dangerous and an awakening that could reshape their lives forever. Rumors spread like wildfire. People started recounting their own strange experiences: a black cat that crossed their path, the feeling of being watched late at night. The girl with the dreams, Sophia, spoke up again. "I saw the battles. I saw giants. They were not just stories." Her eyes burned with desperation as she glanced at David. "But they're coming back. Are we ready?" That question loomed over them, casting a shadow even darker than the ones created by the sun's unnatural rays. David felt a knot tighten in his chest. They were not ready. He wasn't ready. But he knew he had to find answers. The whispering voices told him to follow the old woman, to decipher the truths locked within her chants. The old woman began to sway, her chant evolving into a wild rhythm as if calling forth something from deep within the earth. Around her, the crowd shifted uneasily, eyes darting to each other in confusion and fear. It was time to act, but where to begin? In a bold move, David pushed his way through the mass of bodies, determined to reach her. As he drew near, the woman's voice crescendos, and the onlookers gasped again. The heavens will align for those who seek truth. The mighty will fall, and the humble shall rise, but beware the signs. Before David could catch his breath, a low rumble echoed. The ground vibrated beneath them, and the sky darkened as lightning split the clouds. A collective yelp surged from the crowd, people scrambled to find safety, but panic gripped them like a vice. Something was coming, and whatever it wasn't he going to wait for them to prepare. David's legs ran without thinking, heart pounding in rhythm with the increasing chaos. He kept his eyes on the old woman, who stood resolute. How could she face such raw power? He reached her, breathing heavily. What do we do? In that moment, the woman locked eyes with him, her gaze a mix of wisdom and fear. Find the scroll. The answer lies within, but the words barely left her mouth when the air exploded with blinding light. A force unlike any other rushed through the square, freezing time itself as everyone stood paralyzed in awe. What unearthly truth awaited them? And would David discover the scroll before it was too late? The stakes had never been higher. The blinding light faded to an eerie glow, revealing a shifting landscape before David's eyes. Fragments of the world seemed to dissolve, replaced by vision scenes from the past, shadows of future events that twisted like smoke. He blinked, terrified yet entranced, as the old woman's voice echoed in his mind like a ghostly whisper. Seek truth, find the scroll. The crowd appeared suspended in time, fear etched into their faces. But as he stood next to her, David felt a strange warmth pool in his chest, something pushing him to act. When the world came alive again, it was as if the universe had held its breath. Where do I even start? He muttered, urgency gnawing at him. In that moment, the old woman raised her arm, her finger pointing toward an ancient structure that loomed at the far end of the square, an old synagogue turned ruins. The very walls appeared to whisper of long-forgotten secrets. The secrets of the past. The scroll waits for the chosen, she intoned. David felt a jolt of determination pulse through him. He pushed off from his position, his feet pounding against the cobblestones as he raced towards the synagogue. Each pounding step quickened his heart, drowning out the chaos behind him. He could hear whispers growing louder, urging him to turn back, to flee from what loomed ahead, but something in him screamed to move forward. As he approached, the entrance yawned wide, a dark mouth beckoning him in. What if I'm not chosen? He thought, his breath quickening as he crossed the threshold. Inside, heavy shadows danced in the flickering candlelight. The air was thick with dust, a suffocating blanket wrapped around him. He felt as if he had stepped into a living memory, a moment frozen in time, echoing the heartbeats of those long gone. In the far corner, a soft glimmer caught his eye. David moved closer, revealing a small wooden box, its surface etched with intricate patterns that told stories of epochs past. This must be it, he whispered, trembling fingers reaching for the latch. But as he opened the box, a blinding light erupted once more, much like before, except this time it felt like a living force wrapped around him, pulling him down into the depths of history. Visions surged forth, a flood of images flashed across his eyes. He saw fires consuming the land, giants crashing into civilizations, and then the birth of hope, a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, blessed by a star that illuminated the night. The light dimmed, and just as quickly, an urgency shot through David. Alongside hope came a warning, a voice that shattered the peace in his heart. You will face darkness before the light. Protect the scroll at all costs. The final words echoed ominously under the vaulted ceilings and rang in his ears like a bell tolling for a fallen hero. He stumbled back, confusion swirling in his mind. What does that mean? How do I protect it? The moment slipped away as a loud crash sounded from the entrance, sending sheer panic racing through his veins. The old woman's chant echoed once more, "Beware the signs." With dread tightening his chest, David rushed to the entrance just as figures emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked figures with eyes blazing like coals, unleashing chaos upon the gathering crowd outside. David's heart hammered in his chest. He had to act. He had to do something. What would he choose, protecting the scroll or confronting the immense darkness they had unwittingly awoken? And could he decipher the ominous warning before it was too late? The clash of chaos erupted outside as David braced himself against the cool stone wall. The figures, draped in shadow, moved with an uncanny precision, their faces obscured beneath hoods. He could hear their voices, low and rhythmic, chanting in a language that twisted the air around him, a terrible melody that sent shivers racing up his spine. "Get back!" he shouted, urgency gripping his throat. But no one heard him. The crowd was consumed by panic, scattering in all directions like leaves caught in a storm. A violent surge knocked him off balance, and he stumbled backward, the wooden box still clutched in his shaking hands. That he could feel eyes upon him, fiery, unyielding, blazing with a hunger for something he could not yet comprehend. David's mind raced. The scroll. They were after the scroll. But what was it? Why was it so important? With a deep breath, he forced his legs into motion. He had to protect it, to understand what it meant. But as he stepped closer to the entrance, a sudden flash of light ignited a snarl of shadows, pushing him back. The cloaked figures shot forward, and he instinctively raised the box as if it could shield him. "Leave him!" a voice boomed, deep and resonating, cutting through the chaos. The ground trembled slightly as one of the figures, taller and broader than the others, stepped forward. "The scroll belongs to us." Fury and fear welled up inside David, and before he could think twice, he bellowed back, "You want to take it? I don't even know what it is." The figure's laughter echoed, dark and chilling. "That is the point, little one. It is not yours to know. It is not yours to protect." Just then, a bright light flickered above, a star, or perhaps a spotlight from heaven, illuminating the entrance. The tall figure shielding the others paused in surprise, and in that moment, David seized the chance. He dashed deeper into the shadows of the synagogue, sensing an urgency to find answers amongst the ruins. Behind him, the pursuers howled, their voices mingling with the cries of the crowd outside. He could feel their presence drawing closer, linking him to the ancient and the forgotten. Heart racing, he made his way past broken pews, past faded prayers etched into the walls, and into a dim, side chamber. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and mystery. In the center, a pedestal stood, crumbling with age, and atop it lay another scroll, a shimmering artifact that seemed to pulse with energy. Fear and exhilaration surged through him. This could be it. The scroll from the vision. He reached for it, heart pounding against his ribcage. As his fingers brushed against the cold, fragile surface, a voice whispered in his mind, a sweet, haunting melody urging him to open it, but a dreadful thud echoed behind him, and he spun around. The cloaked figures were closing in, their eyes now mere embers in the dark. "Foolish boy!" one shouted. "You don't know what you just unleashed." With trembling fingers, David lifted the scroll, and in that moment, the world shifted again. The walls began to crack and crumble, light bursting through as symbols and words swirled around him, wrapping him in a cocoon of past and future. "Protect the scroll." David remembered the woman's words, but how? Before he could even think, instinct took over. He tore the scroll open, and the visions erupted from it in a violent torrent. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of something colossal, but what? The world twisted again, and all he could hear was the echo of chaos and the dark laughter of the figures closing in. As the shadows engulfed him, he realized revealing the truth could either save them all or destroy everything. What was the truth hidden within the scroll? And would he, too, become a map in the dark, or the light they desperately sought? The scroll unfurled in a brilliant flash, and everything exploded into light. David's breath caught in his throat as the symbols illuminated the chamber. They danced like stars, letters, numbers, and shapes twirled in a cosmic ballet before cascading into the air. He shielded his eyes from the blinding glow, but the light seeped through his fingers. The whispers began again, swirling around him, a cacophony of voices that glided on the edge of recognition. They spoke of an ancient prophecy, of battles fought and lost, and a future that hung in the balance. In that moment, David felt his heartbeat sync with the rhythm of the scroll. It was as if time had folded in upon itself, dragging him into layers of meaning so deep he could barely grasp them. Fragments of history flickered in front of his eyes, a temple in ruins, a king crowned in shadows, and a victory that rang hollow. God, what did it all mean? A sudden slam echoed behind him, jolting him back to fear. The figures were upon him, fanning out like a dark cloud, their chants rising in a feverish pitch. Each step they took sent vibrations through the floor beneath him, threatening to shatter the fragile connection he had forged with the scroll. You are meddling with forces you can't comprehend. The tall figure thundered, rage twisting his features into a mask of fury. You think you can wield it? The scroll will consume you. Desperation clawed at David, pushing him to act. The scroll was still shimmering, the images begging him to decipher their meaning. They wanted to be understood. But could he? With a deep, steadying breath, he looked back at the scroll. The whispers faded momentarily, and he zeroed in on a symbol that caught his eye. A simple spiral echoed within the vast tapestry of ancient text. He sensed urgency, the spiral seemed to pulse, to beckon him. Tell us what you see. One of the cloaked figures shouted, his voice frantic with desperation. Shut up! David yelled, feeling a rush of rebellion swell within him. He turned away from the figures and focused on the overwhelming glow, allowing it to wash over him. It happened in an instant. A flood of vision washed through him, the energy from the scroll enveloping his being. He saw a city bathed in flames, the cries of a population lost, darkness swallowing hope. But he also glimpsed another path, shimmering in silver, a thread of humanity weaving through time. Lead them, the voice whispered in his mind. You must show them the way. But before he could process the implication, darkness crashed into the chamber like a storm. The tall figure lunged forward, arms outstretched. David's instincts kicked in, and he dove to the side, heart racing as he narrowly avoided the grasp. Foolish boy! The figure hissed, stumbling into the pedestal as it delivered a concussive quake through the stone floor. Dust fell like snow from the rafters, and the walls trembled. The energies around David surged, and with that, clarity struck him. This scroll was more than a prophecy, it was a tether, a gateway to shape reality. Fight for it. The voice urged again, drowning out the growing clamor of fear. The cloaked figures regrouped, their fear ebbing as they realized how close they were to seizing their prize. The chaos of the world outside felt distant but real, shadows of the crowd's panic flowed just beyond the entry. Yet here, in this chamber of echoes, David stood on the precipice of destiny. The scroll beckoned him again. What did it want from him? In one heartbeat, he understood the fate of countless lives depended on his next move. In a flash of courage, David clutched the scroll tightly, ready to unleash its secrets. But the tall figure surged forward once more, his eyes fierce and determined. Give it back. The room shuddered, the light from the scroll flaring fiercely as reality itself seemed to warp around them. David felt it, every ounce of fear and hope mixed into one single potent force, a power that could rewrite the future or obliterate the past. With a wild gasp, he shouted, I'm here to change everything. But little did he know that in those very words lay the key to a far greater peril. The shadow hunters hissed like snakes, their intentions cloaked in malice, and David realized he was not just fighting for the scroll, he was fighting for his very soul. What had he just unleashed? And could he truly protect the truth without sacrificing everything he cared for? The air pulsed with tension, crackling like static as David's defiant shout hung in the air. The tall figure charged again, a whirlwind of rage and desperation, but something deep within David stirred a determination he had never known before. I won't let you take it. The words echoed from his lips, fueled by raw emotion. He stepped back, forcefully planting himself against the pedestal, feeling its solid weight against his spine. The scroll's light vibrated against his hands, warm and inviting, filling every corner of his mind and body. With that warmth surged flashes of history, visions of light cutting through darkness, rekindled hope driving back despair. If he could unravel its secrets, maybe he could rewrite the fate set before him. Through the brilliance of the scroll, he glimpsed the faces of those who would suffer, families torn apart, children crying out for salvation, and an entire world on the brink of collapse. Enough! He yelled, thrusting the scroll outward, defiantly exposing its shimmering surface to the encroaching darkness. If you want it, you'll have to kill me first. The cloaked figures roared in fury, rallying around their leader, their intentions seeping through the air like poison. But David felt an unexpected surge of power. He had tapped into something beyond himself, a connection that fused him to the scroll and the history it encompassed. Foolish child! Snarled the tall figure, flames of rage dancing in his eyes. You think you can control it? The scroll cannot be wielded, it will consume you. David's heart thundered, the weight of the words echoing inside his mind. The scroll was a thing of immense potential, but its powers were double-edged. Could he truly master its secrets without being drawn into the darkness? He glanced towards the tall figure, and in that moment, David saw fear flicker in his opponent's eyes. It was a brief glimpse, a candle's spark in an ocean of shadow. With renewed resolve, David decided he would not submit, he would defy this fate. In a sudden rush, he whispered a silent prayer to the scroll, pouring his fears and hopes into a singular drive. Show me the way, he breathed, eyes closed, feeling energy pulse through his fingers. Then, without warning, the scroll erupted into a blinding beam of light. Waves of illumination burst forth, washing over the chamber like a tide, illuminating everything in its wake. The whispers returned, louder now, as if the scroll itself had come alive to offer guidance. Caught in the torrent, he opened his eyes to see the spirals swimming before him, symbols that defined choices, paths branching out like a vast network. Just then, the tall figure lunged again, arms reaching, desperate to seize the glowing artifact. Every instinct in David screamed for him to retreat, but an unshakable sense of purpose rooted him in place. Bring it! He shouted defiantly, stepping forward into the swirling light, embracing the chaos swirling around him. I'm ready. The moment felt suspended in time, tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. The scroll's power coursed through him, illuminating visions of what could be a world united, free from the chains of despair, but also visions of the greater dangers lurking in waiting, like dark shapes poised to strike. Just as the tall figure's grasp nearly shattered David's hold on the scroll, a strange gust of wind swept through the chamber, swirling around them with an ethereal howl. The very fabric of reality seemed to ripple and snap as the light spiraled outward, creating shadows that danced along the walls. In that fleeting moment of distraction, something changed. David sensed it, a stirring in the air, an awakening of forgotten truths. But what emerged from the shadows? What horrors lurked, testing his resolve? Look! A voice shouted from the back of the crowd that had gathered outside the chamber, muffled but urgent. David barely registered the words. As the light peaked, the cloaked figures recoiled, fear merging with uncertainty painted across their twisted faces. But David's heart raced, driven by the possibilities that teetered on the brink of chaos. Just then, the scroll emitted a sound, a deep, resonating hum that synchronizes with the rhythms of his heartbeat. He understood now, unlocking these prophecies would not only reveal a path but also awaken a force that had long lain dormant. What truth waited beyond the veil of light? David felt the shift within himself, but the clock was ticking. Darkness stirred beyond the threshold of the chamber, ready to pounce on the slightest moment of weakness. And then, with a shattering crack, the chamber door burst open, revealing shadows that crawled in, ready to seize everything they desired. David realized he had ignited a storm, and the battle for the scroll had only just begun. In that moment, he knew the choice he had made would irrevocably alter everything. But would it be salvation or damnation? And as the shadows moved, ready to claim their prize, David stood firm, determined to unlock the scroll's power not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever hoped for a better future. Would he be able to harness the light, or would the darkness consume him whole? The room trembled under the weight of impending doom, a storm of shadows swirling at the entrance. David felt the thrum of the scroll pulsing between his fingers, its warmth now a fierce beacon in the chilling dark. The cloaked figures, their features obscured, began to advance, their movements fluid like predators stalking their prey. "Stand back!" one of them hissed, their voice a mixture of gravel and venom. David tightened his grip on the scroll, energy crackling around him like the static before a lightning strike. He could feel the scroll's power radiating outwards, as if it was urging him to rise above the fear that threatened to swallow him whole. "David!" A familiar voice called from the back. It was Sarah, her face a mix of worry and determination. She had followed him into this chaos, and for a fleeting moment, her presence anchored him. "We can help. Just tell us what to do." The words propelled David forward, igniting a spark of hope in his chest. He felt the scroll flare brighter, a manifestation of his resolve. "Everyone! Stay close!" he yelled, voice casting an invisible barrier against the encroaching shadows. As if reacting to his command, the scroll's light dimmed and then exploded outward in kaleidoscopic brilliance, illuminating every corner of the chamber. The cloaked figures shrieked, their bodies writhing in the blinding glare. It was more than mere light, this was truth laid bare, revealing their darkest fears. The tall figure leading the charge stumbled back. "No!" he bellowed, clutching at his face as if trying to shield himself from the purity of the scroll's glow. "You cannot win this. The past will consume you." David's mind raced. The past. He had to understand it, harness it. The scroll felt alive, whispering to him stories he had yet to decipher. "I will not let it control me," he declared, stepping toward the ancient powers unfolding before him. The chamber filled with a cacophony of voices, echoes of battles fought and victories claimed. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the tide, feeling fragments of time wrap around him. He saw their faces, the betrayed, the forsaken, and those who had dared to rise against the darkness. In that moment, a loud, unnerving crackle shattered the air, snapping David back to the present. The shadows, emboldened, began to tank the luminous barrier. They surged forward with inhuman speed, their claws reaching for the light, wanting to snuff it out. "Now!" David shouted, readying himself for the inevitable clash. He poured every ounce of hope and determination into the scroll, a lifeline against the encroaching chaos. The light intensified, and with it, visions surged once more, visions not only of devastation but also of potential redemption. "Stand firm," he urged, urging everyone to hold on to the flicker of hope. As he opened his eyes, he locked onto Sarah's pleading gaze. Together, they summoned the remnants of courage gathered within. The shadows convulsed, hesitating in the wake of the scroll's overwhelming radiance. But David felt the ground shake beneath his feet as a piercing shriek erupted from the tall figure, one that resonated with ancient fury. "Foolish child! You don't know what you've unleashed," he warned, and in that moment, realization dawned on David. This wasn't just about the scroll, it was a battle for the very soul of those who stood with him. If he faltered, they would all be lost. The air thickened, charged with desperate energy. Time had become a mere whisper, and David knew now that this fight was just beginning. As the shadows rushed forth, darker than ever, the scroll hummed with a promise of power untamed. David gathered his breath, ready to unleash its secrets, knowing the weight of every choice lay in his hands. Would they prevail against the darkness threatening to engulf all? Or could it turn out that the scroll's true purpose led down a treacherous path none could foresee? And as the first shadow broke through the light, David took a step forward, a bolt of lightning in his heart, daring to embrace the unknown. What would happen when the scroll's choices rippled through reality? Only the unfolding chaos would tell. The shadows surged forward with an urgency that sent a chill racing down David's spine. He could feel the very marrow of the earth trembling beneath him, a silent warning of the volatility ahead. The scroll, now pulsing like a heartbeat, screamed for action, and David understood his task more than ever. Rallying himself, he pushed back against the encroaching darkness. Light! We need light! He shouted, his voice rising above the din of hollow shrieks that echoed around them. Without waiting for a response, he grasped the scroll tightly and closed his eyes, envisioning the power within. As if sensing his thoughts, the scroll ignited in a blinding burst, casting away the shadows that threatened to engulf them. His heart raced as waves of energy rippled outward. Each flash of light painted the walls with memories, visions of lives lost, battles waged, and a relentless battle against despair. It was invigorating yet terrifying, pulling at the very fabric of his soul. "David, what are you doing?" Sarah shouted, frantically trying to get closer to him, but the pressure of the shadows pushed her back. "We need to find a way to escape." He felt the desperation in her voice, fraying against the corner of his mind. But he couldn't turn back now. "We can't flee," he replied, commitment hardening his demeanor. "We have to stand and fight." The flickering light revealed the twisted features of the cloaked figures, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. David's grip tightened on the scroll, and the air thickened, heavy with impending dread. The tall figure, still writhing from the light's embrace, steadied himself, his voice a low growl. "You think you can resist the tide of time? You will only harness your own doom." "No," David countered, feeling his courage swell in defiance of fear. "This is about more than just me. It's about us. It's about those who came before us and those who will follow. We can change the course." With a sudden shift of will, he willed the scroll to unravel its ancient secrets. Words surged through him, foreign yet familiar. Each syllable felt like a lifeline, igniting the very air around them. Thunder rolled as if the heavens were responding to his call, shadows screeched, vibrating with raw frustration, attempting to push back against the torrent of light. The ground heaved violently, sending tremors rippling across the chamber. David anticipated their move and directed the scroll's energy like a conductor commanding an orchestra. "Hold on!" he yelled to Sarah and the others behind him. "Focus on the light. Trust in it." The cloaked figures recoiled, the brightness cutting through their darkness like a knife. David felt adrenaline surging through him, racing against time. But this energy had a cost, and he could feel himself beginning to drain, like a candle melting away. Was this the moment where everything he fought for would come crashing down? "David!" Sarah's voice rang clear above the noise, pulling him back from the brink. "Don't lose hope." In a fleeting moment, their eyes met, an unbreakable bond, a reminder that they were in this together. If they shared this burden, perhaps they could shoulder the weight of their fate together. "Together," David murmured, a small voice breaking through the chaos. With renewed determination, he shouted the incantation with newfound fervor, unleashing the scroll's true potential. Light exploded forth, enveloping both them and the shadows in a shroud of brilliant luminance, and then silence struck a tangible stillness, like the calm before a storm. The shadows dissolved, retreating momentarily, leaving only shimmering remnants in their wake. But the tall figure stood defiantly against the residual glow, a look of dark uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "This fight is far from over," he warned, retreating into the depths. "You've merely sparked a greater abyss." David's heart raced. What did that mean? He glanced at Sarah and the others, exchanging equally troubled glances. A new fear gripped him. Had they truly just begun a battle far larger than themselves? "Ready yourselves," David whispered. Uncertainty creeping in but determination hardening his resolve. "We're about to find out what they've set in motion." The air around them hummed with tension, hinting at a looming threat. The shadows may have receded, but they were far from gone. What awaited them in this uncharted future? And how deep did the abyss stretch? As the space flickered with whispers of uncertainty, the horizon lay open, chillingly inviting. As the silence filled the chamber, David's senses sharpened. Unseen forces twisted the air, weighing heavy with the remnants of fear and uncertainty. The glow from the scroll dimmed, leaving a slate of shadows that seemed to pulsate with a dark life of their own. David felt the weight of what lay ahead, and doubt knotted in his stomach. "Do you think we really won?" Sarah's voice trembled, breaking the eerie quiet. Her eyes searched for answers in David's face, but all he could manage was a tight-lipped nod. The truth lay buried beneath layers of threats yet to come. "No," David finally said, the word feeling too small against the enormity they faced. "We might have just ignited something worse." Suddenly, the ground shook violently, rattling the ancient stones beneath their feet. David staggered, gripping the scroll tighter, its once magnificent glow now flickering ominously. Around them, the very walls of the chamber began to shift. Dark tendrils reached out, clawing toward the group, pulling at their shadows as if desiring to devour them whole. "Get back!" David shouted, pushing Sarah behind him. He felt the rush of adrenaline, the instinct to protect rising like a tide. "Everyone, stay close. We can't get separated." A low rumbling sound echoed through the chamber, resonating from deep within the earth. The tall figure's warning echoed in David's mind, a greater abyss lay waiting. What did that truly mean? Was the darkness simply retreating, or was it merely regrouping for a more ferocious attack? As dread coiled around him, a flicker of movement caught his attention. From the depths of the shadows, he saw shapes writhing, morphing, a cacophony of whispers filling the air, echoing with long-forgotten sins and torment. "David! What do we do?" Sarah's voice quivered, panic threading through her words. "We fight, just like we did before," he replied, though his voice faltered slightly. Facing the shadows head-on, he raised the scroll high. Drawing in a deep breath, he closed his eyes again, letting energy surge through him, calling forth every ounce of courage to ignite the light once more. But even as he summoned the power, he sensed it, the looming despair behind the shadows, an ancient pain begging to be released. The scroll throbbed in his grasp, a visceral connection. Was this darkness a mere byproduct of his power or something deeper, more ancient? With a loud crescendo, the shadows lunged forward, revealing twisted faces that howled with agony. "You cannot change fate," they screeched, a chorus of fury mingling with sorrow. "You'll be lost to the dark." David felt cold sweat bead at his temples. "That's where you're wrong." He unleashed a burst of light, fierce and brilliant, but the shadows retaliated, pushing back fiercely. He stumbled under the impact, only to find Sarah's hand clasping his tightly, her unyielding strength feeding into his resolve. "We can't let them win," she shouted, her conviction igniting a fire within him. The painful cries of the shadows rang around them, racked with an agony deeper than they could fathom. "Focus on each other. We're stronger together," David roared, feeling the pulse of unified determination flowing amongst the group. With every heartbeat, they echoed each other's renewed strength. But just as victory seemed within reach, the tall figure emerged again, a wicked smile twisting his lips. "I warned you," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "The true battle has only begun. Prepare for the reckoning." David's heart sank. What had they unleashed in the depths below? The shadows stirred with newfound energy, coiling like a predator ready to pounce. "Everyone, brace yourselves!" David screamed, the dread gripping him tighter than ever. With a deep breath, he prepared to unleash the power of the scroll one last time, grasping onto hope tightly. But was it enough to stand against the oncoming storm? As the walls shook and the shadows surged forward, David's resolve solidified. Together, they might change their fate, but at what cost? A gut-wrenching thought engulfed him: was there a way out now that the abyss was fully unfurled? The air crackled, the storm brewing with distressing anticipation. What sacrifice would they need to make, and would they ever emerge from the darkness that threatened to consume them all? Only one thing was certain: the true battle was only beginning. The shadows writhed and pulsed, inches away from consuming David and the faces of those who stood with him. The tall figure loomed like a storm cloud, a grin hinting at triumph and despair. "Do you not see?" he rasped, eyes glinting like coals, a sneer twisting his features. "This is your reckoning." David's heart thundered in his chest, an invisible war raging in his mind. Would the weight of the scroll be enough to turn the tide? He felt the trembling of Sarah's hand in his. They were not alone. Glancing around, he caught the hopeful flicker in their eyes, a fire kindled by unity. "We can do this!" he shouted, defiance lacing his voice. The shadows surged, reaching for them with ghostly fingers. But David stood firm, channeling every ounce of determination coursing through him. "Together!" he rallied, the words wrapping around them like an unbreakable shield. "We have to focus on the light. We are stronger together." In that crucial moment, David closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the scroll radiate through him, harmonizing with the energy of his friends. The binding love and hope shimmered like a tapestry of stars in the darkest night. They were the flickering flame amidst the storm that he projected that thought the warmth into the air, and the scroll glowed in response, illuminating every inch of the chamber with blinding brilliance. The onslaught of darkness halted, hesitating under the overwhelming force of hope. He sensed the shadows recoiling, a flicker of fear visible on the tall figure's face. "Keep breathing," Sarah urged, her voice cutting through the thick tension. "We need to clamp down on this light." With every breath, they solidified their presence in that moment. "I won't give in," David yelled, determination solidifying into action. The light surged again, breaking through shadows like dawn breaking through a long, dark night. The power from the scroll pulsed, and for the first time, he felt an intimate connection that bridged the divide between him, his friends, and the ancient energies encased within the scroll. The glowing tendrils wrapped around their bodies, lifting them together. They hovered in unison, their hearts synced with the fading shadows, the ancient energies whispering words of empowerment. "Let the light guide you," he heard softly, and felt the depths of history urging him onward. Suddenly, a loud blast erupted, and the walls trembled under the weight of a furious storm. The tall figure shouted in rage, "It will not end this way. The darkness will return." But that only fueled David more. The darkness roared in protest, colliding against the light with a desperation that echoed in the stone walls. "This ends today," David bellowed, pushing the light forward in a massive wave, a final stand against the dark. In an explosion of brilliance, the shadows screamed as they were torn apart, the tall figure lunged with fury and fear. But the light closed in, consuming him entirely. It was a radiant purge, banishing the darkness, turning chaos into clarity. With every ounce of strength, the light spread outward, engulfing everything in its path, and then the echoes of the past drifted away, replaced by a serene silence. As the blinding glow faded, the chamber returned to its ancient quiet. David gasped, slowly lowering the scroll, which now pulsed with a gentler light. The shadows were gone, the looming threat had receded into nothingness. He turned to find Sarah, breathless and shining with relief. Did we do it?" she asked, voice trembling with disbelief. David felt the weight lift. The shadows had been subdued, not destroyed. Perhaps salvation didn't mean obliteration, but understanding, binding together the past and the potential of the future. "I think we did," he replied, the reality settling in. Boisterous cheers erupted around him as their friends took a step closer, hearts finally unburdened by the shadow's weight. Hope filled the chamber, interweaving with echoes of triumph. In that moment, they knew their bond eclipsed the darkness. Life would go on. But then the scroll, pulsing softly in David's hands, reminded him the journey wasn't over, merely transformed. "We still have much to learn," he whispered, realizing the weight of responsibility laid before them was now intertwined with choices that could shape the world to come, and as he stood amidst friends' faces bright with hope, the future gleamed like a new dawn. They had much ahead of them, but they would face it together, for every ending could become a new beginning to cherish and defend. So, would they step into the light of new truths ahead, or allow themselves to be swallowed again by doubt? David tightened his grip on the scroll, readying himself. This was not just a close, this was a promise. Let us discover it together. Now, as the remnants of chaos drifted away, they stepped forward, united. Unseen threads pulled them into a journey yet unwritten, their minds teeming with visions of what could be. They were ready to weave their future together, step by illuminating step. It was time to embrace their fate and carve the world anew. You need to subscribe now to be a part of this ongoing adventure and not miss a single moment of what comes next. Smash that like button now to help everyone see this extraordinary conclusion. Tell us in the comments what you thought, what your theories are, and how you felt about this ending. Let's connect. This is your moment to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.